So, musically speaking, what goes into a Batman theme? What goes into a great Batman theme? So, if you're a composer, let's say you've been given the task to musically interpret a piece of Batman, uh, like an artwork, like an art piece, whether film or a play. Well, in a musical respect, it would be a musical. Um, let's say you were tasked even after all these interpretations, or maybe you're the first composer. In the hypothetical world, maybe you're the first composer to write a music theme for Batman. There are ways to approach this, and I would hope for composers that this kind of approach would help you compose for any kind of character or any kind of environment, whether in a film or in a video game. But to understand the nature of musical composition, especially for the visual medium, especially for film. So, musically speaking, what goes into a Batman theme? Well, we first have to ask. You're given this task. Hey, I've got to compose music for this character, this iconic character, Batman. Well, the first thing you have to ask is, who is Batman? And culture, by and large, throughout his history in the comics and in the visual media, culturally speaking, we're mostly aware. Most of culture understands Batman to be the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is, I would say, a good depiction, is a good first place to start, because the Dark Knight, well, if you look at the word knight, that is the hero, that is the guardian, that is the keeper of the peace, that is the defender. And when you input dark, in front of it, that signifies tragedy. That signifies solemnity, some seriousness behind it. So the Dark Knight, for whatever your opinion of the title is, culture by and large sees Batman as the Dark Knight, the dark defender. And this depicts noble, tragic heroism. He is noble, as a knight is noble. You can't have someone who betrays. You can't have someone who does not demonstrate virtue. You can't have a person like that be a knight. A knight, as we have understood knights to be for centuries, someone who demonstrates, who performs heroism, who is a noble person. So the Dark Knight, I would say, that's the title for Batman. That is the noble, tragic heroism of his character, of his life. So we have to see that and extend that. We have to expand from that. And we have to go into his setting. So we'll talk about the setting actually of the character himself. Why is he tragic? Well, obviously it's with his origin story, him witnessing as a kid the murder of his parents. And his parents were subject to the lawless system of bureaucrats, of corrupt police enforcement, of mobsters, of gang members, of just violence, of just crime. And crime that had just been embedded in the city of Gotham because of the higher ups not doing their work, or being corrupt about their work. The entrance of Commissioner Gordon really cleans things up. And I love Batman as that detective archetype, where he'll help the police, but he'll also work outside the police. Like, he's not working for the police. He's doing his own thing, but he's doing what the police should do, and that is bringing people to justice when the politicians and the leaders and the police won't do it themselves. He will take matters in his own hands, whether the police like it or not. So he, because of his tragedy, does not want others to face that same experience or a similar experience. He does not want to see the tragedy of the innocence. It's very important that it had to happen when Bruce was a boy because that's the time of innocence. And I love the character of Batman very, very much because he has wealth, affluence, and a platform. And with wealth, he could have had the power to play a a malicious deed and demonstration against criminals. He could have been brutal. He could have been an anti-hero. He had every opportunity. And even some people would say he would be justified. I wouldn't say he would be justified in doing so because of his parents, his parents' death. I wouldn't say he would be justified in seeking vengeance. But that's kind of a human instinct. That's kind of a human thing you have to control and quell if you want to demonstrate virtue. So he has, he has the property, the affluence, the influence, the wealth. He has anything he could ever possibly want to seek vengeance and destruction upon the people who had wronged him or even the system on a whole. But he doesn't. He also has wealth to be decadent and live a life of vice because of his tragedy. A lot of tragic characters go on to, demonstrate vice and live a life of luxury and decadence. And I hear people, and it doesn't make sense, but I hear people kind of complain, well, oh, Batman, he's he has all this, wealth about him. And I was like, that makes him even cooler because rather than live in a lap of luxury, he actually goes out and defends the innocent. And in seeing the Arkham Origins gameplay, it's like he didn't have to do that on Christmas Eve. He didn't have to go out in the cold and in the slums of the city and beat thugs and help protect people and go after these assassins. He has a safe house. No one knows where his Batcave is, besides Alfred. He could have just been in hiding. That would be almost like that's an instinctive thing to do. Like, okay, I've got 8 assassins after me. I'm just gonna hide during Christmas Eve. But he doesn't because he knows those people would kill to get information or hurt or maim to get information on Batman and his whereabouts. So he goes after them. That's so cool. In the bitter cold, he goes after them. But he has all the wealth to do the exact opposite. That's why I think it makes him even nobler as a character that he has this wealth. And I know there's a lot of people who have like anti-wealth sentiments. It's like, well, that actually, I would say, bolsters his virtue and his light side, so to speak, because he could run from all of this. He can live in a lap of luxury and all of this vice, but he doesn't. He chooses to pursue justice even when it's hard, even when he gets beaten up and kicked around and all of that. So that's the setting of the actual character himself. And then you go into the setting of the city of Gotham and what that's like. Now, Gotham, obviously, the name, the first thing you think of when you even hear the name Gotham for the first time is Gothic, is that kind of dark fantasy element. It goes back to the medieval architecture that survives all the way to, I think, early Baroque, maybe even to the end of Baroque, which is in the mid 18th century, getting into the 1750s. And so that's something for a composer to consider, is that the city of Gotham is depicted as dark, as Gothic, as I would say Baroque is really known for ornamentation. So you could say that's not really Gotham to me. I don't see like lavishness. I see dilapidation, maybe the dilapidation of lavishness and ornamentation and architecture and buildings and all of that. But like the top politicians and the corrupt police, the the top dogs of the police force, yeah, they could probably live in decadence. Like the character of the Penguin, he lives a life of major crime and networking, but he's also quite influential and has affluence. He's got kind of that posh vanity about him. I think in the game it's depicted where he's wearing like kind of a long fur, so there is that lavishness about it. So Baroque ornamentation, things like a lot of fluid writing and melodic writing, melodic lines just going all over the place. That sense of ornamentation. So as a composer, you consider that as well. You consider the noble, tragic heroism of the character, and you also consider the setting. Gotham is very much integral to Batman's life and experience. Like Gotham and Batman are just they are kind of a mirror image, the place and the person. Now, I would say with writing a superhero theme, you have to consider other superheroes, that have a relationship with Batman. And I think the biggest one, of course, is Superman. Now, I would say people could fall into the temptation of saying, well, Batman is the opposite of Superman. Superman is optimistic. He's light. He works in well, he can work in dark places, but he's always most he's beautified. He's depicted flying through the blue skies. He is that figure of optimism and hope. And the Prof had a really great video, and actually, Prof, you can put it in the chat, because it's this wonderful video. But you had written a blog, I believe, some time ago, based on an artwork where it's just this beautiful artwork where Superman and Batman are standing next to each other, somewhat at a different angle, but the sun is beaming through Superman as he's standing tall and proud, and then the light of the searchlight is beaming through Batman, with kind of the gargoyles. So I think Superman, I think in this art piece, he's standing on a statue or a figure of like a golden eagle, and Batman is on the gargoyle, that kind of old Gothic art. And they're not opposite to one another. Rather, Batman is rather the inverse, where he is the virtue of Superman, but rather working in the day, he works in stealth in the slums at night. He goes to the dark corners and brings hope that way. So he is that same nature of Superman. He just works in a very different setting. Metropolis, I would say, is the opposite to Gotham. But the two guardians of the two places are not the opposite. They would be really the inverse. Like I'm the day, I'm the night, but we still are joined together. It's kind of like the rotation of the world. We have our sun and we have our moon. We have our daylight, we have our nighttime, the light of night, whether it's the moon or the stars. And both are beautiful in their own way. So Batman displays the virtue, but in a night setting, in a dark setting, and also in an ugly setting. He himself is not ugly. He himself is not malicious, but his setting is. And the composer would have to consider that. The composer would have to consider, well, Superman is the daylight optimism. He is the daylight version of hope. So obviously, John Williams chose Superman's theme to be in major, and it would have to be in major. Hans Zimmer with his Superman theme is not major. It's not Superman at all, but it's not major. John Williams writes it in, I believe, the key of C. That is a very regal, royal key. The key of C is meant for the royal processions, the royal ceremony. It is military. It's a very much a military key. It's a march like. It's going to a war with optimism that you are fighting for the good, and that's actually what causes it to be quite American. That culture of march music, the culture of even a little bit of Americana. I'd say not Americana, but the music of John Philip Sousa with his very, very famous march music that you would hear, at a bazaar, you like an American bazaar, on July 4th. That's very much Superman. He is major, major versus minor. Major is a very bright sound versus dark sound with minor. Major is a very open sound with the major third, which is um, a greater spacing, a more open spacing. The major third is a more open spacing to a minor third, which is a more closed spacing. The closer the spacing between the two intervals, the two notes, the closer dissonance it becomes. So with Superman, you really can't. You do have dissonance with his theme. I'm not saying he's void of dissonance, and his dissonance is very important. I did talk about the Superman theme, and I do talk about a little bit of dissonance in that video. But it's very much wholesome. It's very much full of hope. It's very much full of this is being American. This is being virtuous and patriotic, and we want to defend the American way. That's all over John Williams' Superman theme, and it's fantastic. Batman has to have his theme in minor. Why? He himself is a virtuous character, just like Superman, but he has a very tragic past, and he uses that tragedy as fuel to prevent others from having the same or similar tragedy. So he's still noble as a character, but he has to have the tragic element. And minor, the key of minor, any minor key, the minor mode, any kind of minor mode, depicts tragedy much better than major. It has a lot more room and a lot more flexibility with dissonance, and I'll talk about it on the fixed video pretty soon. But minor, the minor key has chords, has a chord progression that is a lot more flexible to go between dissonant intervals, and also going back and forth between minor and major chords, where you have a lot more room. And I think with Batman, it has to be harmonically thicker than with Superman. It has to have much more density. It has to have a harmonically dense kind of crunched, kind of yearning feel than even with Superman. It's not to say Superman is all hearts and flowers. No, he goes through a lot too. And you guys, especially with you who have read the classic Golden Age and Silver Age of Superman, rather, yeah, he goes through a lot. But the environment is different. So if you're a composer for Batman, you have to compose with these ideas in mind. How is he the same as Superman, but how is he different? So that's another thing to consider when composing a theme for Batman. And finally, talking about Gotham, Gothic architecture that survived into the 16 and 1700s. Well, that was the time in Western culture and Western history, Western music, where Baroque flourished, from early Baroque all the way to Bach's death date, which was in 1750. So with Johann Sebastian Bach, you really get into things like figured bass, 4-part choral writing, and a lot of tension and release, a lot of moving between consonants and dissonance. And I have this with the theme I'm thinking of for composing for Batman. But we have to talk about some elements of Baroque, and this is a little bit easier to depict with actual music in front of you. So I actually will go over this in my upcoming video. But elements of Baroque, I just want to talk about a couple of things. The first thing is suspension. Suspension in music is best depicted when you have notes sustaining over motion that is progressing while one note is sustaining. And I like that idea for Batman for two reasons. One, it shows a yearning, like an an unresolved feeling that this is his fate. This is his work he has to do until his last breath. And there's a yearning. He it was really well depicted in The Mask of the Phantasm with his yearning to go back to his parents, whether the physical grave site of his parents or go back to living, living a life as if his parents were still alive. Like, what would life be like as an adult if his parents were still alive? So there's that yearning to go back to his parents, figuratively and also locationally with his parents' actual gravesite. And suspension, chordal suspension with notes just kind of hanging in stasis while there's other harmonic motion and other musical motion going on is very key in Baroque, especially with Bach, and it would be perfect for Batman, and you're going to see that later. The next thing is diminished chords, and diminished chords in the minor key trajectory is basically, well, what does diminished sound like to you? Well, the word diminutive, the word, something small and compact, very closely spaced. Diminished chords in the minor mode in traditional Western music are notes that are so closely spaced. It causes angst. It causes tension that begs to be resolved. And there's the minor 2 diminished chord. There's the minor 7 diminished chord. And you'll see that in another video. And these diminished chords, actually, excuse me, let me correct myself. The diminished 7 chord is actually in the major key. It's not in the minor key. The major 7 is, if you're not including the leading tone, is in the minor. Yeah, yes, that is correct. If you're not including the leading tone, it's a major 7. But that's not to say you can't use other diminished chords working with the minor key. But diminished chords is a sense of, if you want to put it poetically, it's a sense of suffocation. It's a sense of a closed space. It's almost, if I want to be so graphic, it's like claustrophobic. You do feel trapped. You want a sense of release. And what diminished chords do motionally, not emotionally, I meant to say, speaking in motion, diminished chords actually resolve to other minor chords in the minor setting. And they can, depending on where the bass line is going or where the harmonic line is going, it actually can deceive the listener and go into like a major chord release, and it can sound nice. But the idea of diminished chords is angst and closely, like if a chord were to be a hand motion, it'd be like a clenched fist. So there are a lot of opportunities to include diminished chords in the minor setting, and this needs to be implemented in Batman's music, no matter who you are or what you compose with in terms of what Batman you're composing for. And I would say hopefully you're composing for the iconic Batman. So I talked about suspension and notes hanging in stasis while there's other harmonic motion going on, and diminished chords. And it's very hard to talk about chords and music theory with not having anything in front of you. But if I could talk about it poetically and paint a picture, that's what I mean by diminished chords. Another very important element in Baroque music is the Pickerty Third. This was very, very common, especially in organ music and keyboard music of the Bach family. The Pickerty Third. The Pickerty chord is a wonderful chord, a wonderful element in Baroque music, where it is the final chord. It's the chord that resolves everything. It's the final, death knell or death knell, bell toll. It's the last chord of the piece, not just the last chord of a statement or a section, but it's the last chord of the piece usually. I don't remember hearing a Pickerty Third anywhere inside the music. It's the conclusion of the music. And what a Pickerty Third is in the minor. It's found in minor. Usually you end on a minor tonic. So D minor, for instance, has D, F, A, da, da, da. And that's your minor chord. And the Pickerty raises the third to make it a major chord. Dun, dun, dun. It adds the final hope. It just adds a very good spiritual release after listening to something that is solemn or sad or tragic. And I was thinking about including that with Batman's theme because um, I have two reasons for doing this. The first reason is Batman is a spiritual figure. Symbolically, he's a spiritual figure. He looks to the higher order of things like virtue, things like justice, even when life dealt with him cruelly concerning the murder of his parents and also just the life as being Batman. You know, it's not just gangsters and mobsters and crime syndicates. He works against supervillains. And he's beaten down. Like I never read the comic, but I know there's a pivotal moment in Batman's life where Bane breaks his back. I have a thing with broken bones, man. I almost like this sounds a little okay, this sounds a little strange, but I just can't do torture, especially with when it comes to broken bones. Like I would rather like just be cut, you know, than be broken and still living. I know that's a weird thing. Maybe not. Maybe I would just pray for a huge threshold of and tolerance of pain. But there's something about the breaking of a body that just you know, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. But I know that that's a story in Batman's life, and so he not only is he been unfairly dealt with, as far as life with the murder of his parents, but he's been dealt with blow after blow as Batman, as the figure Batman. But he keeps pursuing, and so when you keep going, there is a higher order of things. And so I think to go from a minor chord as a conclusion to a major chord, da da da. I can only sing one note at a time, but that's a lower, darker feel. Da 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 versus da da da. You'd be able to hear it a little bit better as a chord instead of singing it separately. But I think a Pickerty third, raising it from the closely spaced minor third to a more open spaced major third, like I was talking about with Superman, I think that's perfect for Batman. The other reason I was thinking about is like I was thinking about actually doing my own themes for Batman, Wonder Woman, and even Superman, for like a future pet project or whatever. And I have in mind for Batman to write in his theme in D minor. And if I switched it over to D major, well, that's the dominant fifth of G minor, which I would use for Wonder Woman's theme. She would be a minor theme as well, but very full of hope and optimism with her nature. So I think the Pickerty Third is a very common Baroque element. Maybe not common, but it's quite common. Would be perfect for someone like Batman. And lastly, would a very common thing that's just so beautiful in early Baroque. Actually, I meant to get a Baroque book, a violin duet book that I have that includes this element in some of the very early simple Baroque music. The time of Jeremiah Clark. There's another one too. I can't remember his name. There are early Baroque composers that are not as well known, but I wish they were because they just really write beautiful music. And that is the flat 2 chord. And if I were to give you the natural minor scale, I'll just do D minor. Da 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 da. The two chord, the second degree, D E. Well, E would be lowered to an E flat. Da 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 da. And it really brings it down in a very solemn but very, very beautiful way. And if you actually put the third in the bass, it's also called a Neapolitan sixth chord. That's actually introduced a little bit more in Beethoven's time, if I have that correct. But the flat two chord on its own is a very beautiful element of Baroque, early Baroque, actually. Maybe even it actually might have been introduced in the Renaissance. Yeah, actually, I wouldn't put it past it to have been introduced in the Renaissance, but very common in early Baroque, and I would definitely include that with Batman. In fact, I did include it with a chord that you will see in another video, in another upcoming video. So I wanted to talk about the elements of Baroque too. So that's a lot to take in as a composer, but I hope that gives composers an idea of really how to compose music. What ideas should cement this depiction of a character or a setting or a world, an entire planet, an idea. Maybe it's a love story, maybe it's a hero's journey, maybe it's a tragedy, but that's how composers should really think when they're given the task of writing for especially a character of a visual medium like film. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Some ideas for you composers out there. And I would just say have fun composing original themes for Batman.